3, 2, 1, and we are live. I hope so. So hello everyone in this awesome .NET diagnostic webinar that we have today. Thanks to Mark, Downie and Christophe Nasarre that agreed to be our guest today because we have huge amount of knowledge now online about .NET diagnostics. So it is only 1 hour condensed, but it could be spread to 1 day probably. So that's all. I'm Konrad Kokosa from Dotnetos. I hope you know us a little bit. We are in general guys who are related to .NET internals, performance, scalability, diagnostic, everything which is advanced in .NET world. And we are happy to organize such events like today's webinar that are about .NET diagnostics, but we are not to describe that there is a debugger and you can apply F5. We go deep, we like to understand things, we like to put a lot of knowledge on you, so that's today's webinar also. Okay, so from my side, that's all. Mark and Christophe, maybe you can introduce yourself. It will be the best approach, probably. Let's choose the alphabetical order. So, Mark.
Sure. Hi there, everybody. My name is Mark Downie. I am a program manager on the Visual Studio Production Diagnostics team. And my kind of primary thing I think about is as soon as you deploy your app into production, I'm thinking about the tools and the scenarios that will make you successful in debugging them in production environments. And I want to think about the workflows and the tools that you need to be successful, whether you're on your desktop or if you're in your Azure or essentially anywhere. So I'm thinking about my job really is to make sure I'm understanding the kind of community needs and the community friction points, and hopefully share that with our engineering team, and hope we kind of produce the tools that everybody wants to use. So hopefully today I'll get a chance to kind of share some of the more recent updates we've done to our tooling, and maybe get a bit of feedback from the community about what tools or features you want to see in the future.
Yes, we want a lot.
Sure.
We want a lot.
Good.
Thanks. And Christophe?
So I'm Christophe Nasarre. I'm working from France, and I'm working for Criteo in a team that helps the other team in the company to make their application as performant as possible. And when there is some problem, trying to help the team to find out what the problem are and provide diagnostic tools that relies on some of stuff that Mark will probably mention today.
Right, and you are a speaker on conferences about things that you find on your production.
Yes,
servers.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to do with my former colleague Kevin. We try to, as Mark explained, to tell everyone what can be done with the tools for real world issues. I think that's important to share that.
Very nice talks. Find Christophe on YouTube, and you will find a lot of informations.
Yeah.
2 things to add, and because there is a question. This is a public event, because maybe some confusion for people that are currently attending our Async Academy, because we have set of webinars for them, but those are private. This is public, so you can spread the word about it, share the link, invite people. It will be also recorded. And the second thing, this is kind of a discussion, chit-chat about .NET between people interested in that topic. So also do not hesitate to ask. We will answer while the questions are coming. If you have any questions, want to add to something, it is just a discussion between us and you. So please feel invited to ask questions and just simply join to this event simply, and also say hello from where you are. For example, we have United States, Poland, France, and you from where you are. It would be nice to know. And I believe let's skip to the presentation. It's enough of introductions. So we have slides like this, and Mark The scene is yours.
Okay, excellent. So I guess today's agenda, roughly, obviously questions from any angle is fine, but just roughly the rough agenda for today, we're going to start talking about Visual Studio 16, some of the more recent changes we've made there to help you with debugging and diagnostics more specifically. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about dotnet-monitor. It's a brand new tool that we think will be helpful to people who are trying to egress and capture diagnostics artifacts in some scenarios from Linux to AKS. We think this tool really shines. I want to talk about dotnet-trace and some of the improvements that made for .NET 5, and also .NET Stack, and again a new tool here that we think is going to be really helpful to people in some diagnostic scenarios. So that's the kind of rough agenda we have. I think we're going to start off with Visual Studio, diagnostics and debugging. Got a few topics I want to kind of go over here that I think might be useful. Folks, again, if you have questions, please put them in and we will answer as best we can. But this is kind of
no bad questions.
Yeah, none whatsoever. Please jump in with questions. Really interested in people's response to some of these features. It may not work for you. Again, some of the things I can think I create are great for some and not so great for others. Some people like CLI tools. I'm a Visual Studio guy, but I also like CLI tools as well. So I'm interested in the workflows that different people have. So we're going to kick off with cross-platform debugging. I'm going to stop sharing here for a moment just to kind of show where we are. Hopefully you folks can still see Visual Studio here. And what I'm about to do is, if you can see here, I'm going to share my desktop right here. I actually have a memory dump, but you'll notice it doesn't have an extension. It's actually a memory dump, a core dump actually from a Linux machine. And I'm going to just drag and drop that right into Visual Studio. And oh, looks like I may have it open already. Give me a second. Let me reopen another Visual Studio session. So that
Right. Live demos are
always the way. All right, let's go.
By the way, we have a lot of people from Spain, Australia, Portugal, Netherlands, Czech Republic, France, Poland, India, Guatemala, Jordan, Greece, Croatia. So
no pressure.
No pressure.
Good.
It's only you, and it's only you presenting the Microsoft tooling. So.
What could possibly go wrong?
Right. Something's bound to go wrong now. Anyway, I just opened what I just did. If you noticed, I dragged and dropped what I assure you, and just to prove that this isn't me faking you out with an extensionless file, I'm going to go ahead and look in the module list here. And you'll notice that the .so kind of tells you something specific about this dump. It's obviously from a Linux-based dump we've taken, and I've just opened that immediately in Visual Studio. It's part of the changes that have been supported by the .NET team. They've been cross-compiling the DAC, and as you know, the DAC is kind of like the core components for understanding structures and objects in the .NET framework. And they've been cross-compiling, which means if I get an artifact from a Linux machine, I can now start now debugging it on a Windows machine. That's not something you've had to do. And in the past, you probably would have had to create a container that matches the environment you took the dump from, which is obviously a pain. So this is not just Visual Studio, to be clear. This is other dump debugging tools can have the same ability. But we've been you'll probably notice a trend with a lot of the work we're doing where we are thinking in a much more cross-platform way. So I can start, for example, debug with managed only in this scenario, and look at something like the parallel stacks and kind of see what's going on.
To interrupt you,
Please
just
go ahead.
to clear. So you have taken a dump on Linux, on some environment, on some version of kernel and anything else installed there.
Yep.
And you don't care like what was there, because now you have moved this dump to Windows machine. So probably a lot of developers are using Windows machines on their local setup, and without the care which exactly version of, let's say, kernel or .NET framework was there, you are able to open it in this particular machine, right?
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. So we've tried this with several Linux distros. We've tried. I think there's at least half a dozen Linux distros we've tried this on, and we seem to be having some really good success.
Awesome.
So we're interested again, community. Let us know if you're trying it and it's not working for you. Please let me know. Drop me a line. I'm happy to kind of dive in and work with the engineer who enabled this feature in Visual Studio.
And does it require .NET 5, or it is like backward compatible? Like I can take .NET 3.1 and open it on my machine that I have only .NET 5, let's say.
Yeah, you'll be able to open in that scenario. You'll be absolutely fine opening it. Yeah.
What would be the minimum version of the runtime?
3.1. Yeah, the minimum is 3.1.
Okay. And if I have a fork version of 3.1,
which is a very typical scenario, obviously.
You would expect some weird questions from me,
to be sure. I think we're gonna have to check out your version. If you have a dump you can give me, I have to check it out. And see
clarify things, Christophe's company is using a forked version of the runtime because of their needs. So this is a specific use case, but right.
Yeah, I got some error messages trying to do that, and I will go back to you, Mark. But this is one of the things that is really interesting for us, is the ability to have a memory snapshot taken on the Linux box, as you explained, Konrad, and then analyze it on a Windows machine. You mentioned Visual Studio. I guess you could talk also for windbg.
Absolutely.
Okay,
yep.
So that's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Would it be the same?
Anyone tried to do that on Linux previously, and also to match every possibility, every setup of this production Linux machine, and try to reproduce it and use it locally, and let's debug it on Linux, it was pain in the ass.
Yes. It was a little bit easier with WSL2.
Yeah.
This is what we are doing. We are having the memory snapshot, downloading it and onto WSL2, and then use .NET Dump. So I don't know if .NET Dump will have the same ability to open it. Would we have to be on WSL?
So .NET Dump should work fine. Again, it just depends on if you. Again, CLI isn't my specialty, but as long as you can access the same symbol servers, you should be absolutely fine.
Cool.
Yeah.
First question. I'm noticing all the questions, just information for people asking, but the very first question, which is related probably a little bit to this topic: native stacks, symbols on Linux from dumps.
So yeah, to be clear, the native team did do a bunch of work with Linux at the same time. The managed team, which is where I'm more related to, so I'm assuming they are able to resolve the native stacks in the same way. But I would need to follow up on that particular question.
You can just look at the parallel stacks, and I will see.
Right.
Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. Do we have any native stuff in the core stack? I can't see, it's too small.
Oh, I think I may have managed.
Yes, because you were in a manage only.
Yeah. I came in as a managed only.
Yeah, you're right.
This concept. Yeah.
Okay, that looks very, very interesting. So we have open and dump, and we have the parallel stacks view for threads.
Yep. So right here, actually, I think right here is where the native. So this is me just double click. I just double click that frame, and it said, well, okay, you don't have the PDB, right? So actually, you do actually have a couple of choices. If you have the PDBs, that's the best option. But you could also decompile. That's a new option. We've been working with a team to kind of help us with the decompilation scenarios. You obviously have to have permission to do so. It's important that obviously you have the permission to look at whoever's assembly you're looking at. But that should give you the ability to kind of dive in. Again, we deployed to Linux. This is a Linux dump. I've pulled it here. I didn't so happen to have the PDB, but this should allow me to kind of decompile and see exactly where I am right now. And as you can see, actually, this was part of a test. This dump was captured as part of a test, and this guy created the core dump creator. But you can see you can kind of have more fidelity into exactly where you might be in a particular set of problems. And being able to do this across platforms is a key scenario we're looking at. And again, folks, if you're using this and you have any issues, feel free to ping me on Twitter. I would love to really hear from you in the scenarios you have.
So I just want to be sure that what I see is what I think I see. The assembly is written from the memory dump, saved locally in a temp folder, and decompiled to have the source code. And the PDB gives you the lines.
Yeah. And to be clear, this isn't local. This isn't like I've got a local version of the code here. This isn't that. If you look at the actual location of the CS file, it created a temporary version right here.
Cool.
Nice, nice.
We can go a bit farther than that. We can go to the modules window if I can find it. I can find, in fact, I'm going a bit out of my script here, but if I could find the original, in fact, app share code. I'm looking for the original DLL. If I can find it, I might be able to essentially decompile the whole thing and extract source code. Essentially, if I needed to, right now we don't have to. I think we have some gaps in our decompilation story, to be honest. But essentially, I can decompile the whole module and essentially look at the code. So I can right-click and extract source code. So now I can see more of the source code here, specific to that particular module itself. Again, and then use my ability to search. Again, you always want PDBs. Again, that's the kind of richer, more accurate to your code. But in those scenarios where you don't, this might be an option for you.
Right, because there is a question about PDBs then. What's about PDBs in this scenario? What they give you more?
The lines.
Yeah.
The line numbers and the name of the C# file.
Yeah.
Right.
The
line
number.
We have the pure decompilation, like in tools like ELSpy or other.
Yeah. But is it possible to just right-click a module and say save?
No, it's
save
not.
as.
Create a solution. And
we used to have
GitHub.
we used to have the dump module in SOS or SOS6. I don't remember which one. That could be nice.
Yeah.
For example, to check if we have the exact right assembly running in production. That would be a nice feature.
Yeah.
This reminds me the Blazor thing. Sorry, Mark, for such a huge jump in, but what's your plans about supporting Blazor? Like, can I take a memory dump from browser to take the state of the whole process and investigate it? What's the status of it?
I don't actually know the story there. I'm going to have to get back to you on that. That's a really good question.
Totally different stream because it is based on Mono and all this, but it is interesting how it will go. Yeah,
that's something I have to do a bit of research on, but that's a good question. I'll make sure I'll do some digging for you and make sure we share it with this community as well.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Another question jumped in. Because you, Chris, asked about windbg when we have fancy Visual Studio. To explain yourself now, why did you ask about windbg? What it gives more than Visual Studio with all this fancy UI?
Christophe, I like your answers here.
I can explain what I'm doing with Visual Studio before doing stuff in windbg. In fact, it's really the fact that with windbg you get a very high-level view of what's going on. For example, the parallel stacks is really, really handy. You have very quickly a high-level view of what your threads were doing when the memory dump was generated. So that's something you don't have with windbg. I had to write an extension for windbg to get that. So it's definitely much easier on Visual Studio. It's working both for Linux and Windows now, so that's very good. I don't know if you have some stuff around memory. I'm pretty sure you will discuss that, but maybe I can wait for that time. But you could use Visual Studio to analyze other kind of files which are not memory dump. Maybe you will discuss GC dumps later.
Yeah, we'll talk about
Okay, so yeah, you can have a kind of synergy between Visual Studio to help you manage, the 80-20% stuff. Right. It's really that with Visual Studio, very quickly you could get a high-level view of what's going on, and when you need to dig into the problem during an investigation, if it's more related to CPU, if it's more related to memory, thanks to the information you get, and then you dig into the problem with the best tool. It could be windbg, it could be I don't know, any kind of tool depending of the problem. So to start the investigation, I think Visual Studio is very nice, especially this kind of post-mortem investigation.
Yeah. And again, it's about picking the right tool for the job you're doing at the time. If I, there's times where Visual Studio is the right tool, but there's times when windbg is just like a better fit for the things I'm looking for and the details I'm looking for. So for me, part of my job is to make sure I understand these scenarios better. I talk to Christophe a lot. I talk to a bunch of people in the community because I'm trying to understand the best scenario you have. And so occasionally the best scenario is windbg. If you needed to know something about an environment variable that was in a stream in a dump, then maybe I need to open windbg. But if maybe I just want a quick look at if I want to look at the parallel stacks, or then maybe a visual aid is more helpful. So Visual Studio again, it's just scenario
if I can jump in.
Yeah.
I'm particularly using windbg because of SOS. Because SOS extension provides a lot of very interesting diagnostic comments, which are very helpful in some scenarios. So that's one of the main reason for me. Which brings me to the question: whether do you plan to support SOS in Visual Studio?
That's a really good question. Something that Christophe has brought up before as well. In fact, we did.
Question.
Yeah, we used to have support for some command lines of windbg in Visual Studio, but it wasn't used a lot. But I think the question is coming up again in a meaningful way this time that I think we have to revisit it. People are creating plugins in various different platforms, and community members are starting to tell us that, hey, the thing I created over here, I want to use over here too. And as we kind of develop those stories, we are saying, well, it sounds like we need some kind of common vernacular, some kind of common language where no matter where you're producing these things, you can execute them. You can execute the command wherever you want. That might be Visual Studio, that might be at the command line in the CLI tool. And so we are starting to think about this this space as a space that needs to be more friendly to sister teams that exist within Microsoft, certainly as the starting point. And as the community builds these set of tools, I think we have to be better equipped to import them into scenarios. Like you might want to put them into your CI/CD, or you may, there may be some kind of other scenarios where you're saying, I want to run this kind of plugin in my workflow. So I think it's a really good. I think it's a really, really good idea, and certainly the community seems to want it.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yes.
And by the way, Kevin, hi Kevin. I believe you are hiding under this nick.
It definitely is.
It adds that Visual Studio can evaluate properties regarding windbg comparing to to Visual Studio, I believe, right? Yeah. And there are some discussions regarding that, but maybe we can skip and just continue with the demo.
Okay. All right. The next portion we're going on to is sync over async example. In the slide, I mentioned that we are doing some work with auto analysis too. Again, we wanted to talk to folks who were solving particular kinds of problems over and over again. So Microsoft has a huge support team, a massive support team that spans multiple regions and areas. And I've been talking to these engineers a lot recently, and they've been saying that we see a kind of a repeating problem. And so from our perspective, frankly, we want to help our support engineers fix the problems or help customers identify the problems faster. But then there's the other side of that where I want the customers to figure it out for themselves, right? So we're asking ourselves, what kind of analysis can we run that makes looking at a dump file easier? Because this is kind of, we are talking about a probably 1% of a development team that really get this. And part of what I want to do is make it easier for people to get into this space and become good. So we're looking at a diagnostics on a dump. And one of the key scenarios we're looking at right now is the kind of sync over async anti-pattern we see a lot with async programming. So I'm going to run the diagnostics analysis over this dump. This is just a regular Windows dump I've got here. I'm going to start this analysis tool. And what that does, again, we're in the infancy of this. We're kind of testing this out with our CSS team first. This is actually available in 16.8 as well. And we're saying, well, I want you to look at this dump and tell me if anybody is in a situation where we would recognize this as a sync over async anti-pattern. And as you know, with sync over async, what happens is we tie up thread pool threads unnecessarily, and we get to the limit of those thread pool threads, and that usually means that our application becomes unresponsive. But you don't see high CPU, you don't see high memory, and folks who deploy their development apps tend not to think about thread exhaustion as the first thing that I should be looking at, or even a second thing usually. Folks are usually thinking about CPU, memory exhausted, why is it slow? But it could be other things. And so we're saying, can we analyze the dump on your behalf? And so in this context, this just analyzed this dump and found instances of sync over async issues here. In this particular dump, it's a contrived example. I was trying to quickly get something for this morning. But in this contrived example, I'm essentially doing a sync wait on an async stack. I'm just kind of tying up that particular thread. And so what we're trying to do is make sure we identify the issue. We give you a summary of the issue, and we point you to a resolution. And that's what we're starting to kind of develop here. And we are kind of hoping to find more and more of these scenarios that we can kind of put into our analysis engine. So I'll quickly show the call stack here. And again, you can see here, I'm going to double click here. Again, I don't have the source code. I don't have the PDB, so I'm going to go ahead and decompile. And yeah, so again, I'm seeing that I'm calling this do something within this consume thread async task call. Any questions on that? I guess any comments, I guess, from the community or from you guys actually.
I have a question that I have already asked, but maybe I can share it with the other people. I would be delighted to write my own analyzer.
Yeah.
So please make it open.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you will get for free. You will get new features, and that would be very, very, very nice. I have built a tiny shell that allows me to add analysis. For example, I can detect duplicated strings.
Excellent.
Okay, it's very easy to implement.
Do you have such plans to open source it?
We definitely have plans to open this up. Part of what we kind of go through is the steps we go through usually for a new feature is we say, do people do people like this in the first place? Is there enough people in this to get excited about it? So this is what I'm talking to you folks, talking to other people. I need to find out that there's value that I can communicate back to the people who give me the budget, right? Yeah. And once I get that excitement, once I get those plus ones from people, I then start to say, well, we are now actually we've got a large community of people who have way more bandwidth than we do to contribute here, and then I make a business case for that as well. But this looks like, as Christophe is saying here, when we first spoke to Christophe, he was one of the ones who kind of pointed me in the direction that, hey, there's folks in the community who have a body of work that would love to contribute in this space. So I think, from my perspective, it's like right in our backbone burner, and we've got it in our backlog. And as soon as we get enough community kind of encouragement, we will absolutely be going in this direction.
Awesome. So we have 100 people online. The future of Visual Studio is in your hands. Put a huge pressure on Twitter about
no pressure.
No pressure at all.
No, it was not a trap. Okay, it was not a trap. It was just an invitation.
Absolutely. Just loose thinking.
Excellent stuff.
Okay. By the way, because when we have one question, which is now is pretty good time for ask, and just for you to put it clearly, which of these features are available in Community Edition and which are in the higher editions?
Okay, yeah, sure. So right now, I don't think I've mentioned anything that is an enterprise only feature. I think everything I've mentioned so far is community. Is community available?
That's good.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on, because I think we're about halfway through right now. So let me go to another dump here. Just show off a few smaller features here. Another interesting thing we are experimenting on. As I say, the thing that we're thinking about is when people start to memory dump, analyze a memory dump, maybe for the first time, or they've only done it a few times, we are asking ourselves the question, what information should we present to them first? So that might actually require a redesign of this initial dump summary page. It may require us to think about the tools we navigate to. So I'm going to actually go to the debug managed memory here. And in this particular tool, what we are saying to ourselves is, what can we do to make the information we have pop a little bit more? And so we're asking ourselves what other examples exist that might show data more clearly. So in this example, you may want to know that the lion's share of the space involved here, and it's obvious probably from here, that the lion's share of the memory here is clearly in this object called data record. Well, we also wanted to look at flames as a mechanism for saying, hey, just like we do with perf tools, just like we do with other tools, we're trying to make sure that folks, we not only point people to the right tools, but that when they get to the tools, we invite them to kind of take a step further into the tool. So again, this is just part of a longer, bigger journey I think Visual Studio is undertaking, because there's tools that have existed in Visual Studio that a lot of people don't know about or don't necessarily realize exists. And so what I want to do as my job is figure out from the community what tools they know about and which ones they don't, and find better workflows for you once you kind of start using that tool. So right now, as you can see with this one, I've got a kind of a flame that kind of indicates, hey, you may want to look at this. This is kind of like an indicator that says, hey, most of the memory is wrapped up here in this particular record. In this particular memory dump, I was replicating an issue with an instance, a static instance that is just growing over time. And ultimately, what I wanted to do was point the user towards, you may want to start looking at this as a starting point for an investigation. Let me, if there's questions, please let them come in, but I'll just move on until...
I would like to mention something that I just realized a few a few weeks ago, is the fact that when you start to analyze memory, when you have the source code and you end up into that particular panel where you get the list of the types, the instances, and the size, that you change the colors of the type depending on are they in the project you are analyzing or not. Here, I think it's memory dump, so you won't have that. But just to go to the same direction as you mentioned is like it's nice to have black and white output like in windbg for years, but colors or icons could really help to have our focus on the very important part. And I think that colors, for example, you can just see in blue, if I remember well, it's in blue. You have the types that are in your project that are in blue in that list, so you know which type are there that you know. And I think this is something really going to the right direction. We all have the same information, but the way to show it to us as user of the tool could make a real difference. Just a quick story about that. I had to write my own tool when I was working at the Microsoft support in France, the kind of people that you were mentioning earlier. I don't know if the name is the same, but it used to be a PFE. And we had to analyze memory dumps to figure out memory leaks. So I wrote my own tool. Everyone is laughing at me with crappy UI, but the idea was to make the comparison and get the same kind of information that you have. And I have a tiny feature that you don't have today, but it's the fact that I was able to hide all the types that were from Microsoft. So that way I could just see all the type from my code or for the code of the customer immediately, because here you have like simple samples, but in a real application you have hundreds, thousands of different types, and even if you sort by count, sometimes it's very complicated. So using colors as you are doing today, having filters, adding icons, I think it's a really, really good move.
Yeah, excellent. So I'm going to jump real quick into another example here. This is a deadlock scenario. This is one that actually I got from Christophe, and I think one of your colleagues, I believe.
Kevin, kookiz.
Yeah. Okay.
Kookiz.
That's him.
Yeah, that's him.
Okay, got it.
So it's followed by production issues.
Got it.
And this is his code that you are using for the demo.
Excellent stuff. So what we were looking at, so we've been trying to make changes to the parallel stacks, and just to fill everybody in, the parallel stacks window is essentially a kind of the big picture view of your threads and your tasks as they're currently in the process. So again, I'm in a memory dump. I'm looking at the tasks, and you can see just the view of this task is you can see that in blue right now, the thread that is currently active, or the one that I'm currently sitting in, is blue here. You can see that I've got 3 threads that all have the same call stack, and then you see they all kind of separate out here into different call stacks. So you can get a good kind of big picture view of what's going on. What we've been working on recently is what kind of information might be useful in this big picture. So for example, you'll notice that we start to annotate the call stacks. So the call stacks themselves now have information about what it might be waiting on. So for example, you can see here that in this, that top frame is actually it's not actual frame of a code. It's actually telling you that, hey, I'm actually waiting on a lock for this thread at the top of this. And you can see here, I'm also waiting on a lock here. And in fact, what you start to realize about the application in this instance that was created is that we quickly get into a deadlock scenario where, and a deadlock is essentially, I know this is you folks probably know, deadlock is essentially one thread is waiting on a lock to be released from another thread, and that other thread is simultaneously waiting on the lock to be released from the other thread. So they kind of cross concerns. So what you can quickly do here is, because we are kind of annotating that top thread, you can actually see who's waiting on what. And just by visual inspection, I can see that 7048 is waiting on 28964. and that 28964 is waiting on 7048. So that's the exact deadlock that we were talking about. And again, it's this idea, this information was always here, but you had to dig a little bit to get it in the past. And the question again that I'm asking myself and the community is, what information should we be surfacing at this layer, at this level? And that was just one of the bits of feedback we got. And again, I'm just kind of, you'll hear me kind of constantly say the community sometimes is the quickest way to good product, because you folks know what you want. You folks know what you need. And so asking you is usually how I kind of come to if I have any reasonably good features, it's usually because a community member has shared something with me.
This is great. I remember not once or twice digging through call stacks in windbg, trying to aggregate them somehow, which was
sync
just
BLK. Sync BLK command.
Yes. And
Good
by
memories.
the way, whether this tool will be able to show you the because this is a log which was taken in managed code, whether it will be able, could show you also unmanaged logs, like using WinAPI or something which is just underneath, or this is only about managed logs taken by log or monitor or anything else?
Oh, that's a good question. So I guess I was aware that it went to the monitor enter layer, and I'm actually not sure. I have to kind of find that out.
But it is even without that, it's awesome. And there is a question from Sebastian, whether it is able also to identify this log, like.
Right. So if I switch to the tasks view, and so I guess I could do this several ways. This was just showing that it's actually deadlocked. That kind of symbol here shows it's deadlocked. But let me kind of go back here. So I think what you're asking me is if, essentially, again, I can go down into the code at this layer and see what caused. Let me make sure I'm
in the monitor enter. You should get the object.
Yeah, and hopefully I did it at the right layer, I think.
If you're able to move your mouse over the parameter, and you get the object itself, I mean,
no
pressure, okay? No pressure, no. Really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if it's not working, that's not a problem. But if you are there,
it will take some time probably now.
Yeah, because sometimes it's enough to know just the piece of code that end up into the deadlock. But sometimes, as Sebastian said, you need to get to the instance of the object that you are locking on. But yeah, maybe it's the demo gods are not with you today.
Not with me today.
But
yeah, I'll come back to that one.
Yeah. Sorry, Sebastian.
It's one of my side effects. Kevin could tell you. It's called the Christophe effect. Really. I'm able to make stuff doesn't work just by looking at them. Like coffee machine, I'm looking at the coffee machine and it doesn't work.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. This looks like it's gone to lunch, so I'll come
just to go back to what you mentioned earlier, and what I mentioned also, the fact that we have the information, but you present it into a form that help us, and you've shown two things that I want just to. So I will talk in just for myself here, okay?
Yeah.
I'm very bad at UI, but I have opinion on UI.
Sure.
So here, for example, when you go to the parallel stack in the thread mode, you don't really see the locks. You have to look at the top of the call stack and so on. Yeah. So orders. So you get the object.
Okay. Phew.
Sebastian. Yeah. That's very nice.
Satisfied.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was talking about just in terms of UI in the task mode of the parallel stack.
Yep.
From my opinion, you have too many information because you have logs when you have red everywhere, so you don't know where to look at.
Sure.
And in the other one, in the thread view, you have no color, nothing. You have to look at all the call stacks
Yeah.
and search for the weighting.
Yeah.
But it's just my opinion here.
We
Since
need
you have
more
the number
icons.
of threads, just to have one tiny red
Sure.
at the one would just look at that thread and we
Perfect.
know where it is.
So
And if I can move my mouse, and when I'm moving at the mouse, it will highlight the other one, the one that lock it.
Excellent. Okay, good. Yeah, I'll work with the team on that. So I think what I heard you say was if you could have like that kind of deadlock icon with these two, which is actually causing it, that would immediately gravitate you towards
Exactly.
it. I like it.
And if I'm hovering my mouse on one of them, it will flash or highlight the one that locks it. You get everything.
I like it. I like it.
And then should be also a button, fix it and deploy in production.
Fix the code now.
Right. Excellent.
There is a question, just to emphasize this fact, it is all from memory dump, right?
Yes.
So we have nothing here like the solution or anything
Nope.
else.
So I do have the solution on this machine, but I renamed it, to be honest, so it wouldn't know where to look, so that I would be forced to do a decompile. And as you can see, this main window.cs is a part of a temp directory because he'd had to create it as part of the decompilation. So that I just wanted to prove that by just kind of hovering here, and you see that main window CS is in the temp folder somewhere.
Great.
And on the opposite, is it working for a live? I mean, if I'm debugging it, do I have the same information live?
How do you mean? So if you,
I mean, I'm in the middle of. I mean, I've just made F5. I'm debugging it, and I can see that my application is just frozen. So I'm pause, going to parallel stack, and I get the same information.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's absolutely. So if you were to get a deadlock in Visual Studio while you're running you could absolutely use a parallel. You could hit pause essentially and debug Windows parallel stacks, and that's it. Would be good to go. Yeah,
Perfect.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's
move on.
Okay.
I feel that we will not end in a strict 1 hour, but let's not make it 2 hours.
Right. Okay.
It's my fault. It's my fault.
No, I'm very happy, but
this is good stuff. Let's see. All right. So I think we were at this point I think Christophe mentioned a couple of times that we have WSL2 now. The reason why I really like this feature with WSL2, which is essentially we have a Linux kernel sitting in Windows. I am traditionally a Windows developer. I've been around since NT4, I think, and IIS and all the iterations of that. More recently, I've been getting into Linux and understanding what it is to create an application that runs anywhere. And it was interesting. I have a open source blog application that I currently run. I've been using again with IIS in app services for Azure. My colleague started to run the same program and was running in Azure App Services for Linux and came across a problem. And probably for those wise among us, you probably see the issue immediately, where I was attempting to upload a file and get the relative folder. And you can see already, I'm seeing Christophe saying, hey, I see why you've messed up, but I'm a Windows developer, I do this. So being able to quickly debug in WSL2 is really, really important. And you can go to your Microsoft Store. You can install any distro you like. And then you can start debugging to it. And just to take a quick look at your launch settings, which is part of your project properties, and you'll see here WSL2. But essentially, you can have several versions of this. So you notice the distribution name is blank, and that kind of corresponds directly to, and if I WSL-L, you can see now all the Linux WSL2 distros I've got installed locally. I've got Ubuntu, which is my default, and that's what distribution name picks up. I could actually create additional ones of these if I wanted to. I could create a few more of those and call this one Ubuntu and this one Debian, and those essentially, and actually I'd have to, I think what was the name of it? I would then put this here, and I could have Debian here. Essentially, I can build up the list of distros I have that matches the environment. Now, to be clear, if you wanted to, if you're interested in production realism, like you want to understand the constraints of your production environment in terms of CPU, this probably will not be the approach. But if you're trying to understand the environment a little bit more, which is what I was trying to do, this is a really great option to add the various, to be able to debug directly against different environments. I'll say also with this particular problem, for those of you interested, what I really should have been doing here to be fully cross-platform compliant would be something more like path.directory separator character. I was essentially trying to trim the start of the directory, which wouldn't work. It worked fine in Windows, but then as soon as my colleague was running in Linux, I could debug locally and see exactly what he was seeing. So again, we're in the cross-platform world. Windows isn't everything, but Linux is everywhere. And I basically want to pick the right tool to kind of replicate the environment I'm targeting. So WSL2, really, really good option for folks.
So Mark, you can start an application. You can attach to an application, both of them.
So I want to make sure I understand the question.
I have my .NET Core application that I want to run on Linux.
Yeah.
Can I start it from Visual Studio, running in WSL? I know that I can attach to a running application on WSL.
Oh, yeah. So this, if I'm hearing you correctly, so if I were to start debugging this particular application, it's a little bit big, but if I start debugging this and look at the output window, if I can, it should show me deploying, is this the right one? It should show me pushing the bits for this project to WSL2 directly on the Linux box. So it's going to push out those pieces. But the attach, I know we've been able to do debugging over SSH for a while. So if you want to debug, and then we have container support. But this is literally going to be pushing the bits, as you can see, to out into essentially the Linux environment.
Okay, so I don't need to set up SSH in my
no.
WSL? Okay.
No, you don't. Cool. No, it kind of pushes this out for you, and this is what this is doing.
That's cool, because I used to do it manually before.
Oh, right. Yeah, so this will install.
That's nice.
The first time you do this, it's the first time you have the distro environment installed, it will ask you to, it'll right inside Visual Studio, it will give the option of distributing the SDK and the other things you might need for you to work with WSL2.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop this because I don't want to get too deep into the weeds there. All right, so we've got a couple other things.
Kevin is asking questions.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I forget about this one. I just yeah, because one of the problem is when you do something like this and you need to interact with the console. How would you do that? For example, you have a console application and you just read from the console to do something else.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'd have to go ask. I do have a contact though, so I'll follow up on that question. I have to make sure you guys, for the questions I have not answered, I guess I'll have to go to the comments and make sure I go follow back up at the end. Okay, my last, I guess, bit for Visual Studio, then we'll move on to other things if we have time, is just a reminder about the perf tool. I won't run it here because it takes up a lot of CPU, but folks who need to understand the nature of their program, it's always good to measure before you go into an environment. This is interesting. It's trying to tell me that I can't do that over Docker, of course. So anyway, I just want to encourage folks to start using the perf tool. I set up a test for some folks internally about the difference between big loops and a regular expression to see which one would take up more CPU. We all got it wrong. A piece of code here I was looking at, I wanted some code that wrote to disk in a big loop. I used a big while loop to write to disk, and then I do a simple validation of a URL with a regex. And the assumption would have been that, potentially we are using more CPU here, even though it's an IO-bound task here. But once we were able to grab record a session, which I'm dragging and dropping into here, what we were able to do was record the session and see exactly where our performance was tied up, especially around CPU. We've also in more recent changes have database performance as well. So we will measure all the database activity. But in this particular, in this particular recording, you see I had some startup cost. And then there was a huge cost right here between about 24 seconds and 40 seconds, which was the time for this particular trace. And as you can see, the hot path, again, this indicator from the flame, is that actually I spent all my time almost exclusively in this regex, which is actually a really badly designed regex. But it kind of can show you, before you even launch to production, hey, this particular method here is going to cost me a lot of money in compute. And I just encourage people to kind of run through actual performance tests before you deploy and see exactly where you are consuming a lot of either CPU or IO or file system interaction. It's important to understand this before you push out. There's some really interesting stats here, so I could actually double click on this regex here, and this will actually, the source is not. I think I've changed the source recently since this recording, but essentially this would show the place where this regex expression was actually being executed, which was So again, I think I've changed the source code since, so that's why it's not showing up here. That's my fault.
Awesome.
I have a question for you. This
Please.
looks really great. We are today. I had to discuss about how to measure this kind of thing. When you have an application with a lot of asynchronous code, it's very hard to measure which part of the code is consuming CPU. So is it using sampling or is it using a profiler? The one that you are using?
I'm actually not sure. Thankfully, my sister team deals with profiling a lot, but I thought this was CPU sampling, to be honest.
Okay.
But I'll have to check. I have to double check just to make sure on that.
Okay. So this is what you get with ETW?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So my second question would be: do you plan, or maybe it's already there and I don't know, to be able to analyze an ETL file? So ETL files are files that you can generate when you collect traces from different provider, like kernel provider to get call stacks, and .NET provider to get allocations and stuff like this. And you could generate ETL or ETLX files. This is what Purview is doing. And sometimes I prefer Visual Studio UI than Purview UI. And specifically to analyze the CPU consumption, are you able to open up an ETL file or something like this?
I don't know about ETL files. I know that we do support net-trace files.
Okay.
I'll have to find out about the ETL files, but definitely net-trace files we support. We essentially convert them as soon as we get the net-trace file. So, yeah.
Thanks. And is it working on a running application? If I want to just attach and do the stuff and detach, or do I need to start the application?
There is a separate tool for attaching to. I'm not sure if that's supported in this scenario for attaching, but we do have a separate tool for attaching. But this one, the one I've showed, is obviously kind of rooted in you switching this to release mode and then starting it up within the actual Visual Studio IDE.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Yeah. Okay, we're at time, but I'll keep going for as long as you guys will have me. So you make sure you stop me when we're at a hard stop.
Feel free to continue.
Right. Okay. All right. So there's a couple of things I wanted to show, more things I wanted to show. Let me kind of go back to our slide just for a quick second. All right. So we've done with Visual Studio. That's all the stuff that I usually am involved with. But I've also been involved with dotnet-monitor as well. I really wanted to make sure I showed this off as well. It's something I've been working with the .NET diagnostics team, has been kind of working with the Visual Studio diagnostics team to think about how we collect the kind of deep diagnostics artifacts. When we think deep diagnostics, I'm thinking memory dumps, thinking core dumps, I'm thinking traces, I'm thinking the information about metrics. We're thinking about that kind of artifacts, and to help with that, we developed dotnet-monitor. And again, we speaking to customers, speaking to our internal support teams. We really wanted to target Linux and AKS because we felt we have a ton of tools for our Windows environments, and we have less so, I think would be fair to say, for Linux machines, and as a result, then AKS. So we've created dotnet-monitor to help customers kind of think about how they would egress logs, metrics, diagnostics artifacts from a .NET application running in AKS. And essentially how we do that is by running as a sidecar, which is a traditional architecture type for diagnostics and observability that is used in Azure Kubernetes. So you would have your user app, and obviously that would be available to the public internet for folks to kind of use your service. We define what is a sidecar container, what is referred to as a sidecar container, and I'll show you a YAML file that kind of shows that up in a second. And dotnet-monitor can essentially egress from your user application any information it needs. Obviously, we don't make that available to the public internet, but that gets we essentially pipe that, and we have an API service where we've defined a API surface where you're able to pull those artifacts to somewhere else. That could include dumps, traces, and as I said, metrics and logs as well. So I actually want to show this off if I can, and see what you folks think of it. So actually, let's start with the YAML file. So this is my deployment YAML file. You'll see at the bottom here, I've defined two containers. The first one is the actual app. It really doesn't do anything, but I just wanted to have something for you folks to see. So I've deployed the image here. And then there's the sidecar container, and that has dotnet-monitor. And you'll also notice one other thing I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of is that there's a mount path temp here that is essentially a diagnostics path between these. And that's essentially, it uses that to communicate via Unix domain sockets. And so I've deployed this. So I'm going to go ahead and
so while you are typing, I will just jump in with the information that from people that have just maybe joined us recently, that it is always good time for questions. So jump in with questions or any remarks or additional pressure to put on Mark, what should be done more in those tools.
So as I mentioned, I've got, in fact, the get services. So this is my service right now. This is the public IP address for my service. I've just with that that I've deployed using that YAML file. In fact, right here, it's a simple demo app. It doesn't really do anything. But I want to show how I can pull diagnostics artifacts from that. And essentially what I'm going to do is do a kube control command, because I'm authenticated. I am running over SSH to my kube using kube control. So I'm going to port forward over SSH the 5232 port, which allows me to get my diagnostics information, and port forward it to 7000. That allows me to look at it locally. So essentially I am using my administrative rights to look at a particular port on that running, and look at that running locally. So what I can do now is do localhost, and that is the process. I now know that I've got one process, one .NET process running on my AKS in that pod. I can do other things as well. I can actually start to stream logs as well. And if I want to do a few things here and start streaming here momentarily, and it's starting to stream my logs. I can actually apply parameters to here. Maybe I only want to see the errors, but essentially this is allowing me to kind of look at anything that might be going on at this particular moment. And more importantly than that, obviously I mentioned I can pull metrics. This is actually the Prometheus style exposition format. It's a text-based format. And as you can see, it's showing different metric types, looking at CPU usage, it's looking at the GC count, exception count, other things. And we can use this format to kind of pipe metrics into other things like Azure Monitor or the actual Prometheus itself. But I'm not just getting stats about the pod, I'm getting stats about that particular .NET process, which I think is really the value proposition here, is that understanding what's going at the service level and the pod is something people have had from the beginning, like folks doing this work has had from the beginning. But understanding that particular process, I think is a really important additional bit of information. So again, you can set this up relatively easy, again, using the YAML file here to kind of to set that up.
Questions regarding that? The very first is what I have read-only file system in container, because this TMP is shared between. So
with that, for now, for .NET 3.1, I think we need a TMP folder. We would need to be able to define that. I don't know if that's something you could change with your image, but we would need to be able to communicate over Unix domain sockets. I think for .NET 5, we will be changing that. I don't think we won't need the TMP folder at all. So
awesome.
Also, ultimately, it's going to be meaning you're going to have to wait till we get the next release out of
yes,
this.
Because it is in kind of preview, right?
It
is
absolutely,
not super production ready thing. Like
yes.
You can start to experiment, but it is not something officially shipped with. Okay,
thank you. Yeah, just to reiterate, it is preview right now. We're still about a month or so away from an official release here. Yes, I'm showing some preview stuff. Thanks.
But it does not require .NET 5, so we can use it with 3.1, for example.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Mark, is it based on event pipes, and the metric that you are showing are the counters that we get from event pipes with .NET counters?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Just as the next question comes in, I've just started tracing this just by going to the trace. It's just as the next question. You can see it's downloading right now a net trace file, and we'll kind of follow this to its natural conclusion. Is there any questions coming in?
We have about the Prometheus integration.
Oh, okay. Prometheus integration, yeah.
So do you have any tool for pushing metrics to it, or?
So essentially what we do is we expose a URL, and essentially the setup from Prometheus is that you would pull from that endpoint. We update that on a regular cadence. I think it's every second or so, and I think that's configurable as well. So however often you're reading, you'll read from this exposition from this particular endpoint. So yes.
So in other words, Prometheus is working in pull mode, so it will ask this URL. We don't need any tool to push those metrics to them.
Precisely.
Yeah, we call it scrapping.
Yeah.
Criteo. This is what we are using.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead. I just downloaded the net-trace file. I'm going to
net-trace file that you have gathered via /trace, right?
Exactly. I just downloaded it. Just came in today. You can see I didn't fake this one out, so I am again taking a risk. .NET from Linux just came in from Linux. What essentially it does, what I believe Visual Studio actually does, is it converts the file straight away to a diag session, and then here we have. We can see exactly what was going on with that particular collection.
So we have counters history, right?
Yep.
Or so we can show it. You can tick one of those, like you are selecting particular counters, because there is no counter selected right now.
Should be able to. There we go. So we should be able to add this information in here.
Right, so we have a history during the trace.
Yeah.
And by the way, I missed that. Where do you configure for how long do you want this trace?
That's part of the URL, so you can put in time as a factor. Also, if you want more complicated traces, you can post data to the trace and say, okay, I actually want a database. I want my database information, and that's part of a post payload. You push it to the
So
the
it is
endpoint.
kind of wrapper around the trace we know from CLI tools.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So you can specify which kind of trace you are interested in.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Also, finally, just just to kind of speed along, but you can also take GC dump. I think I should have time for that one. That doesn't usually take long, but we can also do a GC dump, and again, back to kind of pull us back to Christophe's point earlier that there's a few different types of dumps here, and so now I'm going to go ahead and open the GC dump. Again, I'm going to take my life in my hands and show me the folder, and here it is. There we go. All right. So again, this is coming straight from Linux, straight into on my Windows machine, my preferred location, and I'm now seeing my GC dump on demand as we want. Now, this is just the start. Again, we've talked about this being in preview. The hope is from here, we start thinking about triggers and other things and egress points where we want to save things to. We may want to save them to, some Azure, storage location. We're thinking about those scenarios both internally and for our external customers.
That's really great. I mean, the GC dumps, the fact that again we get that synergy between the tool that on Linux or on Windows generate these files, and we can analyze them the same way in Visual Studio is really great. GC dump is so small compared to memory dumps, and when you need to analyze a memory leak scenario, you just take a GC dump, wait for time goes on that the leaks continue, then you take another GC dump. You have this combo box at the upper right when you see the compare to. So here we have one GC dump. You just compare to, browse. So I would expect that you get another one a little bit later with more objects. And when you open up with this compare, you get, instead of having just the list here, you get additional columns with diffs. And this is really, really great. This is one of the scenario. You remember when we said, should we use windbg? Should we use Visual Studio? Typically, if you have this kind of memory leaks issues, do that. Collect GC dumps, either on Linux or on Windows. Could be on a production machine, could be in a customer site. It's a tiny tool that you can download now. You just generate the GC dump, send back the GC dump, small one. You can send it by email. It's like 10K, 100Ks. And then you can just do the comparison. And with Visual Studio, you will have the list with the count, and in the bottom you see the pass-to routes. This is what we need when we look for why is it object still referenced. This is what we get from the pass-to routes. So this scenario is really something that I really love, and that's very, very, very nice.
And what's your experience on production servers taking GC dumps? Whether it introduces a noticeable overhead, or it is just something
it's really, really fast.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really fast.
That's nice.
Yeah,
and
compared to a memory dump, it has nothing to do.
And it does not contain any data, right? So it is even safer. So
just the name of the types and the count, plus the reference. I just wanted to add something. We have something that is close to what you've just demonstrated, Mark, and we had meetings like a year or year and a half ago about that kind of scenario. But we have stuff running in a container. We need sidecar application and get stuff. So I think it's something just I would like to mention for the audience. But when you said that you want to listen to the feedback of the different people that are using the tool, this is typically where I see where we had this meeting a long time ago, and I can start to see stuff that we mentioned at that time appearing in the tool. I'm not saying that we are at the origin of that. What I'm saying is you are taking care of the feedback, and that's really, really nice.
Yeah,
so for the people in the audience, if you have feedback about what has been presented, please give the feedback and get some return to Mark, because it will just shape the tool that everyone would be using.
Yeah,
so thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, when we started to develop this idea, we went straight to the community and said, what are you struggling with? Where are your friction points? And how can we help, right? And so we spoke to folks who in this space, and obviously Christophe was one of the first ones we spoke to about this, and that helped set our direction. We spoke to a lot of our internal customers too, but your voice, if you have an opinion here, it's important that you kind of share it so that we can create the right type of tools. I'm just trying to make sure I'm in the right places to ask the right kind of questions. But yeah, the community helps, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's not only features. I mean, it's very important to express the constraint that you might have in your own production environment. And for example, the fact that you could pass the port for the sidecar application is something that is just mandatory for us. Okay, because you are in a constraint. It's not Kubernetes, it's Mesos and Marathon, but you need also to specify the port. So if it was not available at the kind of API for the container for the dotnet-monitor application, it just wouldn't work in our application. So feedback for feature is nice, but feedback for constraints is also very important.
Right. What I really like is your approach that you are totally OS independent. So, for example, before diagnostic was using on Linux LLTNG technology, and I have serious issues with versions of it in that particular production server was supported or not supported. Now it is just the runtime with the built-in diagnostics capabilities. Then you have a sidecar, and that's all. No dependencies on the operating system level and at any place. So it is very nice. And the question: do you have any ETAs about that nice monitor tool?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll be able to at least say this much. I am writing up the release with my colleagues. I'm writing up the release announcement. So it should be within weeks or at the outside month or so. But ping me if you don't see it, then you can absolutely blame my prediction skills.
So we
need to provide feedback now.
Yes, yeah. And to be sure, if your opinion, like I said, the next part we're thinking about is triggers. Is a trigger this idea of triggers going to be helpful to folks? So if you are saying, well, I want to take a trace when I have a long GC pause or some other scenario that you're thinking about, that feedback would be helpful for me because I want to make sure that those scenarios are accounted for for what you're doing.
Hmm.
So I guess I can quickly go through these last couple of slides. We just got these last ones are on demos, so it shouldn't take nearly as long. But I did want to share some of the recent changes around .NET 5 that I like. dotnet-trace, for example, can now allow you to, which is kind of the CLI tool that enables you to collect traces of running processes. What's new in .NET 5 is that you can now collect traces at startup. The 2 dashes here kind of is indicating startup hello.exe. And at the startup, I want to be able to see how I'm doing during the startup process. Again, this is helpful if you are trying to figure out why things are taking long during startup. Maybe it's an I/O issue, but if you're not getting the trace, if you're not starting the trace till after it's started up, then that's obviously problematic. And this new startup trace should help you in those scenarios. It also has, it also helps with .NET 5 that its runtime now emits events for the assembly bind via the event pipe as well. So if you want to know why, the assembly loader is not working correctly, or if you have binder errors, this tool can now kind of detect that kind of scenario for you as well.
Fuzzlog is back.
Yes, exactly.
Cool.
Oh,
That's
you're
very
faithful.
cool.
You're faithful, yeah. Also, dotnet-trace monitor. This is for folks who normally .NET-trace would just simply output to a binary format. .NET 5 now, we kind of allow you to send it straight to your command window, your CLI. You can define what providers you're interested in seeing and kind of send out information. In this example, the second example, for example, I'm doing it around GC pause information on that particular process ID. And so it's going to send to the command line information that might be useful. Again, this is a more recent change that I think might be helpful in some debugging and diagnostic scenarios.
It was just for you, Konrad. You see, the GC pause, just for you.
Exactly. Exactly. Everything about GC. And the Grafana integrations are planned. There is a question about that.
I have no specific plans around Grafana, but if my memory serves correctly, I thought they used the Prometheus exposition format as well, but
I'm not sure. It may be.
So let me double check on that, and I'll make sure that that's the case. But yeah, I'll follow up on that question.
I can just discuss what we are doing at Criteo. At Criteo, we are Prometheus is scrapping the metrics and make them available to Grafana. So it's really 2 different pipelines. One is getting the data, and Grafana is displaying. So I'm not sure. I don't know if there is a direct pipeline between the metrics. I don't know, but this is how we are working at Criteo. We have the collection, and then we can see the metrics inside Grafana. I think we are using Graphite database, something like this in the video.
Okay, the last slide before we finish here. I know we're over time. Last slide, .NET Stack. It's a new tool with .NET 5. Again, this kind of quickly pauses your process and kind of outputs the threads and what they might be waiting on. So again, if you wanted to quickly see what your call stacks are doing at the command line, you can point it at a particular process, and then have it show the call stacks that you might be interested in. Again, finding deadlocks or pauses or locks that are taking too long.
I missed that one. Is it in .NET 5?
It's .NET 5, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice.
I missed that one. That's very nice.
It's a brand new one. And that's us. That's the session.
We have a question in the meantime, but it means that I can use .NET Stack on already hanging application in .NET 5. So it is just supported in .NET 5 and we can already use it, right?
Yes. Yep.
And what about .NET, the previous versions? It does require some runtime support, or it is just a kind of...
So all the CLI tools as of .NET 5 no longer require the SDK installed. That's an important point. I think I should have brought up earlier. But the question is a good one, is in terms of what if it can then look back into .NET 3 app. I'm assuming so, and again, I'd have to check that.
Sure. So we are slowly ending. We will have some time for questions for sure, so do not hesitate to ask. It is a perfect time for more questions and more pressure. And another question is from Jakub. Hi, Jakub. We met last year, I believe. I don't know. I don't remember exactly, but you showed, FAT framework. You showed a lot of nice things in .NET Core. And what about .NET Framework? Do you plan to add anything from that to full framework? What's the status here?
So, a lot of the tools I mentioned will work, especially the latest .NET Framework version 4.8, is it? Will absolutely, these features will work there too. A few of them, like the analyzers that I showed, the older versions may not work, especially when you have conceptually different ideas around thread pools. That kind of shifts, especially with ASP.NET. So there's some features that, by the nature of the changes to the CLR, may not work. But with that said, if you've got a .NET 4.8 app running and you want to look at parallel stacks, absolutely work. 4.x actually, parallel stacks. So a lot of what we've showed obviously works across the board.
For example, dotnet-monitor is not, because it requires this all new diagnostic infrastructure, or maybe it may be supported.
.NET, .NET 4.8. That's .NET Core only. So .NET-monitor would be .NET Core.
Okay. Okay, so waiting for more questions, just as a sum up at this moment, because we have two nice links on the slides. So very first, you, Mark, really count on the feedback. So we have here a link for survey about you can say a few words about this.
Yeah, so if there's something that was interesting, something that you want to use, something that you've used and didn't like, something you used and hated, I want your opinion. I want to know how we can make it better. It may not be the tool for you, and that's fine as well. But all that feedback helps me kind of build an idea of what you folks want. And so if you think you might be, if you're okay with kind of providing that feedback, fill out the survey, and I'll get in touch with you, and we can maybe start a dialogue about the tools you're using. Again, I just love to talk to folks. So
awesome. So I pasted the link to be easily clickable for you. So please fill the survey now. And another thing is that if you have tasted the topic, if you are interested in .NET Diagnostics, if you feel like you would like to learn more, we have just prepared, and we are at the stage of preparing a very nice course on that. So there is also a link. You can look around and see whether you will find it interesting, because I believe .NET Diagnostic is super important. And everyone needs to do that at some point in time. So the more knowledge, the better. And we are still waiting for questions. And the one is from Murtada. I'm not sure if I'm spelling it correctly. It's about ETW testing tools, because we were talking about more recent technologies probably. So maybe I can rephrase these questions about, in general, utilizing ETW for monitoring your processes, CPU, memory usage, and so on and so on. Any insights about that? Any ideas about tools that you can use for that? Because we have shown some let's say, developer tools, right? What about monitoring? Is Grafana and Prometheus the best choice, or anything else you can suggest, for example? No,
Mark, you want to
no?
start? Or
No, please. You're the expert here.
I think that there are two questions. First, you have to gather information in which you trust. And we learned the hard way that some performance counters, Windows performance counters, were not really providing the information we thought it was. So that's really the most important part. You need to trust the data that you collect. You can use the tool that Mark shown you, the .NET counter, for example, is a way to get access to some metrics that are related to the .NET runtime. But maybe you didn't notice, but some ASP.NET Core metrics were also available in the screen that Mark shown. So it means that different providers of counters, I'm not saying performance counters, because these are only for .NET Framework and working on Windows. Here I'm talking about CLR counters, and these counters are available for .NET Core applications running on Linux or on Windows. And so you need to figure out which one are interesting. Again, when you are starting an investigation, you start usually from your business metrics. Your application is not answering fast enough. You have like a 95 percentile that is not good. You need to start from there, and then you dig into the .NET metric that could help you figure out: is it related to memory? Is it related to CPU? Is it related to log contention, to thread pool starvation, as Mark explained at the beginning? And so to do that, you could use ETW on Windows, and you could use Purview. You also have different Microsoft tools, older tools like the WPR tool set that is no more used almost today, but Purview could be a good way. But you could also build your own tool. And this is something that I think is really nice, is that you could collect these metrics with your own pipeline. This is what we are doing at Criteo. I've published a lot of blog posts explaining how to do that, and believe me, it's really simple. Really, really, really simple. It's a question of hours. You just build your own collection, and then you send them to your monitoring pipeline. If you are using Prometheus, if you are using Grafana, if you are using anything else, you can just send the data you want. And this is what the .NET-monitor tool is kind of providing, from what I've understood, Mark. You have different of format that exposes the metric that are really interesting. So to answer the question, yes, you could use ETW on Windows only, but you could use also event pipes. And in both cases, you would get information that are exposed by providers. Is it enough for your case or not? It really depends on your scenario. But for .NET application, I think you have everything you need. That's it for me.
Mark, anything to add?
I think that was thorough. Yeah.
Very good answer.
Yeah.
And by the way, I believe, Christy, I can point to your blog as a pretty nice source about how to utilize ETW and event pipes.
Yeah.
So I will post a link to your blog if you don't mind.
Sure.
So
Go ahead.
also visit. Yeah. And by the way, Chris is one of our mentors in the mentioned diagnostic course. The question is from Sebastian, which is, by the way, the author of this course. Do you plan to add triggers to .NET dump? And yeah, for example, generate a dump when an exception is thrown, because then we could get away from prods dump.
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to ask the .NET diagnostics team. That's a really good question. I'll get back to you, Sebastian, on that. I'll make sure I get an answer on that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, unfortunately. I work, so just to kind of clarify, I'm Visual Studio Diagnostics and .NET team Diagnostics as a diagnostics arm as well. So we work hand in hand. So I'll make sure I get to see their calendar and see if it's on there.
Couple of questions to them.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I've got a few.
Yeah. But it's also interesting to see that ProgDump, which is the tool that we are using on Windows for years now, they have shipped a version for Linux with some of the triggers.
Yeah.
I think for the exceptions, it might be more complicated because I guess that the Windows version is just debugging the application. It's just attaching, waiting for the first chance exception event, and then trigger the memory dump. So some dumps might be more complicated to get on Linux than on Windows, but who knows?
Yeah.
Great. So anything to add while we are waiting for the very first questions? Anything you would like to emphasize? I don't know, encourage? We have this survey, so we count on your feedback. It is really like we really have the future of this tooling in our hands, so the user voice will matter. It is not just an empty word, so please fill the survey.
Yeah, again, if you go to fill out the survey, or if you end up, filing bugs, literally my manager and my manager's manager judge me on how well I respond to the community. So you literally do have a voice here. If something, literally the only reason why something doesn't get answered is because, or doesn't get done is because we have to weigh it against maybe 5 other things that the community also wants. Unfortunately, we have to make that kind of calculation, but your voice really is important. So please do reach out.
Awesome.
So you're just adding more pressure on yourself on this one. Okay. I mean, it's up to you. But that's something very important to understand from my perspective, is that Microsoft Teams, I mean, the teams I know and I'm working with, they have used this open source model, and they have embraced that open source model. So if you find a bug, as you said, fill a bug, make it the description as clear as possible. If you have a fix, publish a fix, pull request. They are easy to do. You don't have to be a genius just to make a pull request. Just make the pull request, create a case, show what you need, show what you like. And as you said, Mark, I mean, you are judged on that internally. So, yeah.
That's all.
No, really.
Then they only need to implement that.
Right. Yeah,
but that's a very good approach. Oh, we have one question more. So it is general related. Any demos that explain how to design ETW-based tooling on Windows? So I believe your posts, Chris, are pretty good about that, because you literally covered ETW tooling, right?
And the different kind of scenarios and the kind of events you are interested in. Yeah, I think there is I don't remember if there is a conference where
about
I detailed
ETW.
that. No, about the kind of events you're interested. I don't remember, but you have everything in the blog post. The question that you should ask yourself is what kind of scenario I want to cover. When you say performance issues, it's very, very large. So to go there, you need to understand how things are working behind the scene, and this is what will take the more time. Again, exactly. Memory issue. Sorry, I'm not starting with memory issue, Konrad. Okay, don't get me wrong. Okay, let's say CPU issues, contention, thread starvation, and maybe sometime memory. Very rarely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, I don't see any more questions. 2 things that I would like to point. Very first is some praise about your T-shirt.
This one?
Yes, I believe so.
This is the way. Sorry. This is the way. Yeah. Yeah.
The
And
first one?
I'm not allowed to do any commercial or something like this. No, am I? Because this is idea to code, but I
Private.
like the T-shirt. If you want that kind of T-shirt, go to QWERTY, T-E-E at the end. It's a website you can order a T-shirt. It's quite cheap, and you get this kind of stuff.
Nice.
Awesome.
Okay,
And another one
I'm
about
not
you.
part of the website, so I won't touch any money. Yeah.
And another one about you is about you're willing to write your own tools.
Some tool in the world probably wrote.
That's
There
an
is some
opinion
tool,
I
yeah.
cannot relate to, but
Christophe did some great work with the GC dump team. Did you? Is that right? The dump team. You did some
with the .NET dump.
Yeah.
I bring the extension commands that we had for windbg, and I brought them into .NET dump. So if you want to analyze your Linux dump before windbg will be able to open it, then you can do it. All the commands are now available directly in .NET dump, and it's not that complicated, really. I mean, really.
Okay, the very last question, because I believe I could speak even more hours, but exactly, Chris is going to bed, so
It's late for you guys.
I will not answer these questions because I wrote 1,000 pages about this. So my answer is I believe that yes, but maybe you can relate to this question. Does high-level programmer should have a deep knowledge about low-level system programming?
I have opinions here, but they may be contrary. So I'll give you my brief opinion. I think you will need to know it when you need to know it. To be honest. So I honestly think you can create really good applications without knowing any of those things, and you'll be fine.
And this is a huge achievement, in fact, right?
Yeah.
You are able to do a lot of very sophisticated things, right?
Yeah. But at some point, your level of abstraction, you may said, okay, I need to know a little bit more, or it's not working the way I think I need it to now. So then you have to kind of ask yourself questions about something you weren't considering. You find at that high level, but then you need to then you actually need to kind of understand the abstraction a little bit deeper. And I think that's when you go deeper. Now, if you're blessed enough, like I am, to have started my career as a programmer and got lots of schooling, I started deep and went the other way, right? But not everybody has that opportunity. And so I think you get successful where you are. And if you're curious, go look. If you need it, go look. But if you're creating successful applications, I think that's fine as well. That's my opinion.
I think you are perfectly right, Mark. I mean, you need to know the layer in which you are developing. If you are developing UI application, you need to know your UI framework. If you are developing server application, you need to know your hosting environment. Basically, when everything works fine, you don't need to go deeper. This is what you said when you say you need it when you need it. You need it when things start to not working as you expect them to work. And usually this is the reason why you start digging into the next layer below the one that you are using. And if you are lucky, you find the answer there. If you are not lucky, you go deeper and you go deeper and you go deeper. And the deeper you go, the unlucky you are. Okay, that's really because usually when you are paid working for a company, you are paid to deliver feature, to deliver business value to the corporation. It's a pain that you have to waste your time doing this kind of investigation. The other side of the answer is, are you curious? Okay, I'm curious about that, but I am absolutely not curious about figuring out how my car is working. I go into my car, turn the key, and it works. And that's enough for me. So it's really between these two things. When things start to not working for my car, I'm not opening up the trunk and I'm taking my car to the garage, and that's it. If you are lucky enough, or if you don't want to go any further, and you have colleagues that can do that, or consultant, that's fair. It's really a question of balance, effort between result, curiosity.
Right.
Yeah.
So I like your answers. I will not anything more. I obviously, as an author of a book which is directly for that, my opinion is a little bit economic driven. Like, buy my book, please. But I agree with you totally, obviously.
Yeah, and something that I would like to add here, it's like you can see behind me, I have tons of books, and I can remember the time. So I'm doing the old guy, I remember the time where there was only one book about Windows development. It was called the Petzold. So coming from that time where there was no internet, there was no forum, there was nothing except a book. From now you get and it was smaller than your book. Okay, Konrad, a little bit smaller.
It's a matter of formatting.
But a little bit smaller. But coming from that age, prehistorical age, to the time now where you can just connect with this kind of session, ask questions, you have Stack Overflow, you have MS Docs, you have open source with the source code. So you can really target the level of knowledge you want to reach, and it's so nice. It's so nice.
Absolutely, and that's a very good summary of the state of everything. Okay, we don't have one more question, but the very last one, really, because we need to end at some point eventually. Academic papers related to Windows performance issues. Academical ones, I'm not quite aware of. The only thing that comes to my mind when I see Windows performance and internals is Pavel, and in general Windows internals book.
Yeah, you can find books like this.
You can treat it as yes, a lot of books. And
but these one are more about how to write performance. They will explain what could go wrong, but this one are good ones. So I didn't write them, so I don't get any money for this. You can have this kind of thing, which is quite good.
Yeah. Do you have Windows? Maybe you have by a chance Windows internals by hand?
It's over there. It's exactly there.
Oh, I see.
The red one. You have 3 of them, and and if basically for performance, that this is what
awesome.
I would recommend.
Dare I recommend Pro.NET Management as well?
Oh yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
You mean this one?
Yes, exactly that one.
Very sorry.
Very good. I have that myself.
The physical workout also works like nice too.
Yeah, it's good for me. It's good for me.
A lot of knowledge, as you mentioned. I'm maybe not academical papers, but the amount of reading is endless.
Debugging. Don't miss this one.
And
I would
Sebastian
recommend starting this one. Sebastian also. But yeah, we're talking about these are the ones that are the closest to me. So
right.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. It's very nice to talk, but I'm being afraid that people will just, write them. Those guys were not ending the webinar for 1 hour, and I'm just...
Stop me, please. Stop me now.
Stop me. I talk too much. Go ahead.
I believe it was super interesting. I'm super happy we had you both, and this recording will now endlessly be available on YouTube, spreading information and knowledge in .NET ecosystem. So it was super fun, super interesting. Thank you for being with me and with all us. And I hope we will meet somewhere, maybe
in the future, hopefully.
Some better times.
Yeah, crossing fingers.
Awesome. So super thank you. A super thank you for all participants. And I'm clicking end broadcast. Bye.
Bye-bye.